What is up, guys? Welcome to Tohami Lifts. Today we are going to be talking about the downfall of taller lifters. This is not at all meant to be a negative video. In fact, the goal of this is to be constructive and talk about the main factors at play when you're a taller person in the gym trying to build muscle. And I'm going to give some advice on how to mitigate it. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the fact that having longer limbs means that you're going to have a longer range of motion. This is especially true on the bench press, although it definitely applies to other exercises too, like the squat. So on the barbell bench press, you might have noticed that you might have yourself and a group of friends who all start training at the same time. You all train just as hard, do exactly the same thing. But the people who have shorter limbs end up hitting the milestone PRs way before you, like 225, etc. And it looks relatively straightforward. And of course, isn't to take anything away from them. That's always great to make progress. But you might experience slower progress because when the bar has to travel a longer distance on each rep, more is demanded of your muscles. So you might be working just as hard, but for you to hit 225 requires more muscle mass on your frame because you're doing a greater distance of work compared to someone with shorter arms. Now, this can be mitigated by taking a wider grip. I'm not necessarily suggesting this if you have shoulder issues. I actually have had shoulder issues in the past, but I still take a wider grip because if you just take the narrowish grip that everyone else does, you're really putting yourself at a disadvantage. That said, especially if your goal is to really just gain muscle and you don't give a shit about looking, like the big man when you're benching, by all means, take a narrower grip because like I said, the longer the distance, the more work is involved, and work is actually what we want when we're trying to build muscle. But you might look weak compared to your friends because you have way less on the bar than them. So do with that what you will. The next thing is similar to that. It's that having long limbs equals small legs and arms when you first start training. And kind of the logic is similar to this, although quite different, because think about it. If you have an arm this big and an arm this big, to fill them out to look at the same width requires way more muscle when you have a longer limb, okay? So a shorter limb, as you first start working out, it doesn't take that much time to fill it out this way, and it just starts growing. But for each inch on your arm, and this is total, I'm not talking scientifically, I'm just kind of trying to illustrate my point. The longer the limb, the more mass is required to actually make it look wider. So that means that if you are lanky, when you start, that's probably going to be your weak point, is legs and arms, just because it takes more time to fill out. That said, there is an upside to this. There's not much you can do about it except really train hard. But when you do reach that point, past intermediate, you start getting really into it, you're gonna really look good with a long arm that's also wide. That looks really sick, and people do recognize that. I think people who train do kind of recognize that if someone's like lanky, has a lanky build, but fills that out, it takes longer to get there, but the peak of what you can achieve is higher. So don't be too down on yourself if you're built that way. Next is that it's harder to gain weight. Your metabolism is probably going to be really high. Just the taller you are, just your body needs more nutrients, etc., just to maintain, let alone build muscle. So it's going to take a long time to gain weight. It's going to take more calories to gain weight. You're going to be a hard gainer. But again, that's not really a negative thing, because the inverse is true, that cutting should be easy because you will have that higher metabolism. So everything kind of has its trade-offs. And I'm not saying it's super easy as a short bodybuilder either, because maybe you can gain muscle really fast for the reasons I said. But cutting, you don't have that super fire metabolism that someone who is taller has. And finally, this isn't really a downfall, kind of shitting on you. There's no excuse to have muscles like your shoulders and your chest smaller than your peers just because you're tall. So you do kind of have the pass to have skinnier arms and legs than your peers who are shorter than you, but there's no excuse to have a small chest or shoulders because your height doesn't impact that at all. Even if you have a really weak bench press and someone can bench press way more than you, like I said earlier in the video, that longer bar path means more work involved. So you should still be giving a good stimulus to your chest. There's nothing different about your frame. Of course, everyone has their own like insertions and stuff, but I'm just comparing, like, let's say two people had the exact same genetics and one was taller than the other and the other one was shorter, but all else equal, there's no reason why one of them should have a bigger chest and shoulders. You could argue lats as well than the other. I hope you guys enjoyed that video. Keep in mind that everything has its benefits and downfalls. You might be upset that your lifting journey might take a lot longer than your shorter peers, but just keep in mind how society treats taller men in general. You should just be grateful that you were born that way. Every build has its own pros and cons, and just make do with what you have. All right, guys, peace.